going to go through a lot of great content, have a lot of great data here to check out, so super excited for that. While we wait for everyone to join, I just want to make sure everyone is able to use the question box. So please just type into the question box where you're calling in from today. I know we service businesses throughout the US, throughout the whole world, throughout North America, and I'd love to hear where everybody is from. So definitely type into that question box where you're calling in from. We got Gavin from Dallas, someone from over in Germany. Awesome. Salem, Mass. I'm not too far. I have a friend that lives in Salem. It's just there the other weekend. I live in Malden, Mass. Great to see that. Hello, Catherine. Eva from Asbury, New Jersey. Let's see, we got some folks from Arizona, San Antonio, Texas, Florida, Orlando, Phoenix, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Kansas. Holy smokes. Baltimore, got some folks calling in from over north of us at Canada, Edmonton, Alberta, from Patrick. Hello. Michigan. Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining. This is great to see that we have so many people from so many different parts of the world calling in today. I always love to see that. It's always great to get a super diverse audience from folks that are all in all different walks of life and all different parts of the world. And we're all coming together for one same goal, which is to succeed in search ads, which is awesome. A lot of folks from New England here today. I'm super excited about that. And I rarely do I see that, but that's great. Awesome. So I know that we are going to jump into the content. Glad to see that everybody is able to see the question box and use that. Definitely make sure that's handy. And with that, as we let a few more folks roll in, I'm going to jump into some housekeeping. So for today's webinar, a couple of reminders. The webinar will be recorded. So just know that the webinar will be recorded. You don't have to worry about taking notes or anything. You'll be able to get the materials in your inbox later today after the webinar. And the recording is also easily found on our YouTube channel. So definitely check them out. We have our other webinars on there. If you've missed any of those in the past, those are awesome. So again, you'll have access to the materials. You'll have access to the recording. So this will be recorded for sure. And then also be sure to submit your questions for the Q&A. That's why I had you all warm up with the Q&A box. We love to use that. If you've attended any of our past webinars, the Q&A sessions have been really, really great. So definitely hang on for those. And we'll be monitoring the chat throughout and then do a great Q&A segment at the end. So definitely make sure that you pop your questions in as we go and definitely save some questions for the end as well. All right, so for everyone joining today, for the folks here, you may already be familiar with our brand LocaliQ. You might already be working with us, or you might be working with us, our sister brands, or familiar with our sister brands, WordStream and Reach Local. So for all folks here, even if you're totally new, that's great too, and welcome. I just want to get everyone up to speed with who LocaliQ is. So we're an all-in-one marketing platform that helps businesses find, convert, and keep customers. So we marry proprietary marketing technology and first-in-class service to make sure that you have everything you need to reach your goals and save time so that you have more time to focus on running your successful business. A common question that I get asked at these webinars is, where can you find out more about us? Where can you learn more? Where can you get more information on the topics that we discuss? Where can you get alerts about webinars or other events and offers that we have? Definitely check us out on social media. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. Follow us there, like us. We post about our blog topics and blog posts. We share out content and insights and data. We also give updates about our webinars and events. So if you want to attend more of these, definitely check us out there. And again, definitely check us out on the blogs too on both of these websites. We cover all of the information that we talk about on these webinars really in depth on our blog. So if you need more information, more insights, need more time to kind of digest a lot of the information that we talk about, I recommend looking at our blogs. Wonderful. So great to meet you all. And again, thanks for joining. I am going to be your presenter and moderator for today. My name is Susie. I am a content marketing specialist at LocaliQ, and how I came into this position was I was actually working with our sister brand WordStream originally, coaching folks and businesses just like you all through the digital marketing process. So I took that experience of working with real businesses and applied it to the role that I'm in now, where I write educational content on all things marketing, whether it be social media, SEO, Google ads, Facebook ads, PPC in general, all sorts of topics that we cover on those blogs. I help out and create that content. Follow me on my LinkedIn and Twitter. You can get some updates on some of the content that I create there. And a fun fact about me is, I already mentioned this, but I am based out of Boston and I do love it. It's a little bit of a bittersweet time for me because something that I always share on these webinars is I love the winter time. Very cliche, I know, but I love to go skiing on the weekends in the winter, and I'm a little lost right now because it's a little warm out. Can't really go to the mountains, but I'm looking forward to next season. All right, great. So what we'll be covering today is just our latest data on the average CPC, click-through rate, cost per lead, and conversion rate across the board in 2022 for search marketing platforms. Now, if you're a little lost already on what those abbreviations mean or what that might mean for your business or in the search marketing space, don't worry, I'm going to break it all down for you. But this is new data that we've collected. Really excited to share that, and I'll kind of share the data collection process as well. And then we're also going to talk about why these numbers matter, what they might mean for your business, and why it's important to pay attention to benchmarks like these. And then I think a lot of folks, when you see this type of content or when you're in this type of webinar or reading these types of blogs, you'll feel like, all right, I know that in my industry, on average, you know, my average cost per click should be XYZ, but I'm not really hitting that. Totally fine, totally normal. I want you all to keep in mind as we go through these metrics today that these are just guidelines that I want you to use as kind of a guiding light to where you ideally might want to be. But if you're not where you want to be, totally have been there, and that's totally normal. And I'm going to talk through how you can adjust accordingly if these benchmarks seem a little off from some results that you may have seen in the past. All right, so I love to keep everybody on their toes. If you've attended any of our older webinars, you know I love a quick poll. So I'm going to do a pop quiz to you guys. Please type into the question box. I want to know what your industries are. You know, I know a lot of folks are in niche industries or are in different industries. Here at LocaliQ, we're Stream and Reach Local. We help businesses across the board, across many different industries, all shapes and sizes, all parts of the world. So I just am curious, you know, what are some industries that you folks are working in? I see some travel folks. We have some information on that, landscape and home improvement, performing arts, logistics, legal, health and wellness, hearing aids, great to see, fine jewelry. Holy smokes, what a array of industries we have. Entertainment, aesthetics, social work, amazing, real estate, super hot, financial, PR, communications, legal. Holy smokes, so many different, agricultural, business and industrial, public relations, healthcare, an author, a nonprofit, senior living, boutique agencies. Amazing, 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 amazing. Thank you all for typing that in. Some auto folks, we got some banking folks here. We really have everyone from across the spectrum on this call, and I'm super excited about it. That is super great to see. Now, again, what I will say is we have to segment out our data by industry, and you might find when we're going through this, you have a very specific niche industry, and each business is unique and different, right? So of course, we wish we could break down our industries by, you know, hundreds of different mini categories within those industries. But again, you want to use these as a guiding light. So find the closest bucket to you as I'm talking through these. And again, just use that as kind of your big picture goal for your overall business. But again, I appreciate the fact that everybody is in very specific niche markets. All right, great. So before we jump into the data, which I know you're all eager to see, I do want to quickly talk about how we came up with this data for 2022. So how we collected our search ads benchmarks, we looked at nearly 20,000 LocaliQ search ad campaigns. So definitely a lot. There's a big sample here. And again, businesses of all types and sizes. And it's not just US only. It is across all of North America. However, if there are folks on this call that aren't necessarily based in North America, totally fine too. I want you again to just use this as to get an idea of the general landscape and then apply those same concepts that I'm going to talk about to your business. So we did it for folks that were advertising all through of last year, right? And then into Q1 of this year. In order for us to include a category into our reports, there had to be a minimum of 72 unique campaigns in each category. So it's, again, a pretty wide, generous sample. So these, I would say, are fairly accurate. And we have these averages here. Those are median figures to account for any outliers. And everything that you're going to see here today is set in US dollars. But again, for folks that aren't working in those types of currencies, you can still apply these concepts to you as well. All right, first metric, let's get going. Average cost per click. So some of you might not be familiar with seeing CPC float around. It is kind of confusing because in search ads and in the search space in general, we have a lot of metrics that start with C, right? Conversion, click, all sorts of different metrics. So CPC mostly goes for average cost per click. And how your average cost per click is calculated is it's based off how you're bidding for keywords live in the auction. So, you know, I might bid $5 for all of my keywords for the day, but I only get charged by Google, you know, $1 for one keyword, one click, and, you know, maybe I spend $6 for another click. So it's going to average out to whatever the median would be for that. It can vary between your campaigns and your accounts, so just keep that in mind. And that's totally normal. You're probably not always going to have the same set CPC across the board. You need to be ready to be flexible with that. And it's going to depend on a couple of things. So how competitive your industry is, you know, what keywords might be costing on average within your industry, what you might be bidding on, and again, the health of your accounts. So think as we look through these, how the search platforms will work, right? They have a job to do. They want to provide the most relevant results to the searcher, but then they also need to make money, right? So we're kind of looking at it in two different ways where Google is and Bing as well, right? Because this data is about 80% Google and about 20% Bing. So a pretty even spread across the space, right? Because most businesses are relying more heavily on Google and, you know, doing some Bing as well. So with that, Google, right, might say, you know, I need to show this ad and it's super, super relevant. So I'm willing to sacrifice making a little bit of money off this and getting, you know, this really high quality ad to the searcher for a little bit of a lower cost per click. Versus if I have kind of poor account quality, my ads aren't super relevant to what the searcher might be looking for, they're not, you know, fully filled out, something like that, Google will say, well, this still matches, but it's not really a great result. I'm going to charge up a little bit for this if they end up clicking on it. So, you know, that's not exactly how the algorithm works. It's not talking through it like a person like me or you, but it's kind of a good way to picture how your cost per click could ebb and flow. So let's get into the data. Now I will stay on these slides for a moment because I know everybody does want to see, you know, what their typical cost per clicks are. But for what we found here, the typical cost per click for search ads in 2022 is in the range of $2 to $4. As this has been in the pattern in the years past, industries with highest average cost per click include attorneys and legal services, dental and dentist services, home and home improvement was at $6 to $8 per click. There's a lot of surprising CPCs across the board. Usually you see the higher CPCs with those industries that have longer decision cycles, right? So while those people are kind of mulling over those decisions and maybe searching a few times, they end up having to finally make that click. So that click can be of more value to those businesses, therefore it is a little bit higher. Industries with the lowest cost per click we are seeing here, real estate, arts and entertainment, and travel are all under $2. And again, those are industries that generally have a little bit of a higher click-through rate, right? So people are kind of bouncing around, constantly looking at deals, constantly researching. So they're getting a lot more clicks, and then the clicks might not be as high of value every time. And that's why it's important to look at all of these different metrics together. All right, great. Now, again, as you're looking at these, if you feel like your CPC is totally off from this, don't worry, that's normal. Again, these are averages, and we'll talk about what you can do to bring your cost per click down or why your cost per click might be lower versus higher. And again, please bring any questions to the Q&A. All right, so next up we have click-through rate. Now CTR is standing for click-through rate here, so it's out of all the times that your ad does show, how often do you actually pull in that click? So this again can vary across campaign and account, totally normal, and it will depend on a couple of things. So your ad copy, is it compelling enough to entice somebody to click? So if my click-through rate is low, I know off the bat, all right, I might be showing a lot, but I either am not showing to the right people, so there's not an intent match there, or I am, and for some reason they're just not inclined to click on my ad. Maybe it's not compelling enough. Maybe I have a competitor on the page that's also, you know, really well known, and they're clicking them instead of me. There's a lot of things that you can kind of think through with that, but those are kind of the main things that you want to be thinking about when you think about your click-through rate. Now, all of these metrics that I'm going to be talking about can feel like one might take more or less importance to the other depending on your business goals, right? So everybody is, you know, kind of bent out of shape about cost per click or cost per lead, but, you know, might not be as concerned about click-through rate when they're more focused on conversion rate. That's totally fine. Everybody's goals are going to be different, but this can matter to your account because at the end of the day, getting that click is half the battle to actually getting that conversion. So if you have a low click-through rate, usually inherently you'll also see a low conversion rate because you're not really actually pulling in people to click to actually make that action after the fact. So here we see our average click-through rates here. And again, I'll stay on this for a sec so everybody can see where their industries are. So most of the industries we looked at have an average click-through rate in the 6 to 7% range. Outliers, again, are consistent with previous years. We have attorneys and legal services lower than average at 4%, and arts and entertainment higher than average at 11%. These are going to ebb and flow, and you'll see that relationship with the CPC and the CTR here, right? So as I just pointed out, legal services might have a lower click-through rate, but when they do finally pull in those clicks, right, because it's a little bit of a longer decision-making process, their sales cycle for the most part, they are of higher value, so they cost a little bit more, but they're not like paying for those high cost clicks all the time. They're a little bit more rare and hard to come by for that industry, versus arts and entertainment might have a little bit of a lower CPC, but they're paying for those clicks all day long, right? So it's going to kind of impact how they overall spend. That year over year, some of the highest increases we saw was in sports and recreation. So we saw sports and recreation is up there at about 14%. And we had was at 14%, but they have previously went down year over year. So definitely you're going to see your industries changing a little bit. If you're familiar with any of our previous benchmarks, definitely check those out to compare. Again, these benchmarks are pulled from our blog and our resources, and you'll be able to see year over year change in those pages as well. All right, now I'm getting to the big metric that everybody cares so much about, average cost per lead. And that's completely understandable, right? Your average cost per lead is usually the end game for most businesses because it defines, you know, your bang for your buck, right? So a lot of folks might have seen CPL, that of course stands for cost per lead. If you're not a lead generating business, that's fine. Like, this metric will still apply to you. A lot of people might also know it as cost per acquisition or cost per action, so CPA, and that's how it's shown in the native platform, is cost per conversion. My funny joke about CPL is that we already had CPC with cost per click, so we couldn't call it CPC again because we couldn't call it cost per conversion because we already had cost per click. But at the end of the day, it's calculated by your total spend divided by your total number of conversions. So again, that's pretty basic, going to be a go-to ROI metric for most folks. And it will depend on many different factors, including your current cost per click, right? So if my cost per click is higher and I'm optimizing to increase my click-through rate, that's going to drive my spend up. But if I'm driving those high cost clicks to my site and they're not converting, then my CPL is going to shoot up, right? Because I'm not getting as many leads to offset that. So depending on how you're spending, your budgets, your bids, that will all round out to what your CPL might be. So if you're bidding really, really high, you know, these platforms are going to take what they can get and get that high cost click because you're bidding a little bit higher, but it might not always result into those conversions, which we'll get to conversion rate in a little bit, but I do just want to kind of reiterate that as well. And then also your tracking. And I think a lot of folks forget this, and it couldn't be more important. You can define your conversions however you want. So you could count a click or a video view as a conversion, but that might not necessarily translate to a direct customer or a direct money-making action. So if I'm tracking, you know, a million different actions across my site, I'm tracking calls, I'm tracking form fills, I'm tracking clicks, I'm tracking, you know, chats, and those are all individual conversions that somebody could do. That's going to drive up my conversion rate, and it's going to lower my CPL. So you might have a great CPL, but it doesn't actually translate to the end goal of your business because you're just counting a lot of actions. So in the search platform, it looks correct and it looks nice and low and a nice low CPL, but it doesn't actually translate to money-making actions. So, and then the opposite could happen too. Let's say maybe you're only tracking, you know, one form fill that's on, you know, one page on your site. Maybe it's hard to get to. You're like, why is my CPL so high? It's probably because you're not converting because you're only tracking like one specific action. So I usually suggest to folks to try and find a happy medium there because that can really impact how your results are going to show in the platforms. All right, so going in here for your CPL, again, I know this is a really popular one, so I'll try and stay on it here, but it tends to be a little bit more nuanced than CPC or some of those other cost metrics. So while low cost per lead is of course desirable, industries with higher cost customer values can afford to spend a little bit more per lead. So the industries with the highest cost per lead are attorneys and legal services and careers at just over $80. The furniture and finance and insurance industries and business services industries are not far behind at around $75. And the industries with the lowest cost per lead, under $18, include animal and pets and automotive repair, services, and parts. So the biggest changes that we saw year over year here is in career and employment, which increased 52% from $54 to $81. This makes sense though, as it's one of the industries with the highest increase in click-through rate, and the higher click-through rate can result in a lower conversion rate, causing costs per lead to go up. It's also worth noting that the beauty and personal care saw a 22% decrease in cost per lead from $51 to $40 this year. So again, we're comparing from our previous year over year data that we have, and this is our 2022 data here. And you're gonna notice again that pattern, right? So if my cost per click in my industry tends to be higher, then of course my cost per lead is probably gonna be higher too because I'm spending more per click, and vice versa. And then you might also see changes in that too. So let's say I have a really, really low cost per click, you know, maybe I'm in apparel, but I also have a pretty high conversion rate because, you know, I'm selling, you know, I have a bigger e-commerce website, you know, I'm counting purchases as conversions, my cost per click is pretty low, and, you know, I'm selling pretty much like smaller items, maybe they're a little bit cheaper, so I might be selling more of those. So my cost per lead might still be pretty low and my conversion rate might be really high. And that's where other metrics like return on ad spend can come into play to show the revenue that you're actually bringing in rather than just the cost per lead or per conversion. We have more information on those types of metrics. I won't have time to go into return on ad spend or ROAS today, but that was just one example of, you know, how we want to be looking at these metrics in a holistic way, thinking about some of the other factors that could be impacting each of these individual costs. Great. So our final metric that we're going to go into in depth today, and then I have a couple more notes, is conversion rate. And I definitely favor looking at conversion rate and click-through rate. I know folks, again, like I've mentioned, are big fans of the money-making metrics like cost per click and cost per lead, but I say conversion rate and click-through rate can be very telling to your account. So let's dive into that. So for folks that might see CVR floating around that aren't really familiar with conversion rate, again, kind of doesn't make sense as an abbreviation, but I say, you know, CVR, it stands for conversion rate, and it's saying out of all the times you do get clicks, how many of those actually convert? So again, calculated by your total clicks over conversions. And it's going to depend, again, on some of those other factors that impact other metrics. And this is where it really starts to pull together your account. So again, if your ad copy is super clear on what you want them to do when they get to your landing page, is super enticing, you know, is really strong, you're ranking high up on the page, you're getting that click, then you're most likely going to have a higher conversion rate. But if your ad is misleading or, you know, maybe a little bit of vague, people might still be clicking and you might have a great click-through rate, but once they get there, they're confused, they don't know what action to do, so then your conversion rate is going to go down. And inherently, your cost per lead is going to go up. So we're going to see that, that change there as well. And then intent and query matching. Again, if you are targeting, you know, a keyword that you really, really want to show for, but it doesn't really translate well to the actual action that you want folks to take, that could also impact your conversion rate. So you really want to be thinking about the intent of the searcher, right? So, you know, thinking about those transactional, informational searches versus those purposeful searches that are looking to actually do something, you know, not necessarily targeting keywords that are going to translate to somebody just looking up information or, you know, asking, you know, what is or how to do something, but more like where to buy something or where to book something could be a little bit more action oriented and can help your conversion rate. Also, your landing page is going to have a big impact on this as well. I kind of started talking about that a little bit, of how, you know, depending on how your ad is positioned and how it explains what you're looking for the ideal user to do, you know, that's half the battle. But once they get there, you need to make that action clear and easy to access. So making sure your landing page is loading quickly, making sure that the action is clear, that it's, you know, maybe responsive for mobile users, things like that, that make it easy for people to convert. Because if it's a little difficult or they have to search, you're going to find that your conversion rate goes down and your CPL goes up, because maybe you are matching that intent and people do want to convert, but they get confused once they hit your site. And then again, your chosen tracking method. So if you have a ton of different conversions that you're tracking, obviously your conversion rate is going to go up because you have all these different possible actions that people can do. So it's a little bit easier for them to convert versus maybe just sticking to one action. And that might look different for every business. You know, maybe foot traffic is of a higher value to you, or phone calls, which are definitely still trackable through search marketing. But it really is going to depend on how you set that up. So with conversion rates here, the average conversion rate we're seeing is varying across industries pretty widely. From apparel and fashion and furniture, we saw around a 2% conversion rate, and all the way up to 15% for animals and pets and physicians and surgeons. Dentists and dental services weren't far behind at 13%. And these were the same industries with the lowest and highest conversion rates actually from our 2021 data. It's also encouraging to see that the average conversion rate for arts and entertainment saw a 34% increase, likely due to the changing habits during the pandemic we saw. And shopping, collectibles, and gifts and fashion, however, both decreased by over 50%. It's possible that as much as people are venturing out more, they're researching more online, but buying it in store. So again, something you want to think about with your conversion rate is your entire customer journey, right? So it doesn't mean that your search marketing is ineffective if your conversion rate is low or your CPL is high. Maybe you're driving awareness, maybe they're looking you up, and then they're, you know, you're paying for that click to your website, which I know hurts sometimes for businesses when you're paying for a click that you feel like isn't translating to anything. On the dashboard, it shows that way. But when you really look holistically at your overall business growth, you notice, you know, more foot traffic, more calls, you know, more general awareness of your brand, things like that, more followers even on social. So everything is kind of intertwined when it comes to digital marketing, and it can be easy to forget that and get bogged down into these metrics, but I would keep that in mind as we continue to look through these. So why these metrics matter and how they tie together. You might be thinking, all right, that was a lot of different metrics, a lot of different data. I'm not really sure what my business stands within my industry or within my, overall industry umbrella, whatever it may be. I'm going to try and help, break it down for everyone here today. So I will say this again and again, but you want to be looking at your search marketing holistically. So first and foremost, you do want to start with budget. Now, I am a firm believer in not always suggesting just a budget increase. For those of you who are active in search marketing platforms, you might see that notification a lot. They always want you to raise your budget, and I get it. At the end of the day, the more money you're going to put into a campaign, you got to spend money to make money. You're probably going to see increased results. However, that is not the only way, right? So I always suggest, taking a step back and looking how you can make your budget work for you and set your expectations accordingly. It is totally fine if you have a low budget, but you just have to be ready for, the results that you might get with that budget, which is fine. And you want to find ways to maximize those results within that small budget. So again, I would take a look at budget. It is going to impact some of these metrics here. And hopefully these industry benchmarks help you get an idea of, all right, if I am totally off, where might my budget land in comparison to competitors or within my industry? And again, it's fine. Every business is going to be unique, but I do want people to be aware that it is a factor that I want you to keep in mind. So start by looking at your budget. And if your budget is low or if your budget is high, great. Either way, there's ways that you can make it work. And again, for folks out there with a big budget too, you might still be struggling, right? Because you don't want to have this major budget that you're just blasting out, into these platforms. Maybe there's things slipping through the cracks. Maybe you're not maximizing everything, things like that. And again, vice versa. So grass is always greener when it comes to budgets. I will say that, but I will just remind everyone to look at their budget in an objective way and just be ready to adjust accordingly and adjust your strategy accordingly. So after we kind of know where we're at budget-wise, we can understand, all right, where do we need to make some tweaks? So higher cost per clicks, you might want to look at your keywords and your bids. So if you feel like you're getting a super high cost per click, am I bidding too much where Google is just kind of like taking what it can get, and that will help you rank, and that might help you rank higher and help you pull in those clicks. So you might be okay with a higher CPC if you're getting the results you want. And I would say that for pretty much all of these metrics. Like, if depending on your goals, you might not care if you have a high CPL, and I know that sounds crazy, but you might not. If you want awareness and you're getting tons and tons of impressions, and that's your goal, not who cares that you have a high CPL. I understand that it's important to every business, but at the end of the day, it's going to be dependent on your goals. So if it is okay that you have a high CPC, or if you're aware that you have a high CPC, I'd maybe take a step back for a minute and say, is it worth it for me to have a high CPC? Is it worth it for me to keep my bids super high so that I can rank and get these conversions? And sure, maybe I'm paying a little bit more per click than the competitors in my industry, but I feel like I'm hitting my goals to, get the most conversions possible, or, get the most impressions possible, whatever it may be. So look at your keywords and look at your bids. You can always adjust that. If you are in an automatic strategy, which I know a lot of folks are, definitely the way to go. You might not be able to adjust your targets or your bids, but it is just a good idea to maybe look at your overall bidding strategy as well. For keywords too, you want to be looking at the intent there. So if there is, and some keywords are going to be more expensive, if there's maybe a keyword that you feel is really, really great for your business, it always drives conversions, but it's a little bit higher per click, you might want to sacrifice some lower CPC keywords to balance that out, right? Maybe I'll pause a few keywords that are a little bit cheaper but don't convert as well, or vice versa, right? So if you do have some more expensive keywords that aren't really doing anything for you, well, it's nice to have them in there. You can just cut them down, and that'll impact your overall campaign or account average. For ad copy and quality score, for those of you who aren't familiar with quality score, this is something that the search platforms assign to keywords, and it's based off of 3 things: your ad copy, your landing page experience, and your relevancy. So if your ad is really relevant and really good quality, then you're probably going to have a higher quality score. It's hard to nail down quality score, and we have a lot of resources on this. So I recommend looking into our blog for quality score to understand, everything that goes into it, and how it can help or hurt your CPC. But it is one of the things that will impact how you're charged by Google per click. Because if you have a higher quality score, Google again is going to recognize that as a more relevant or higher quality result for it to show to the searcher. So it's willing to sacrifice and maybe get you a little bit of a lower CPC. And then again, the ad copy as well. So that's going to impact your quality score, but it can also impact your overall CPC, because depending on whether or not it's enticing, if you're getting a lot of clicks, that could potentially bring down your average or raise your average, because these are averages across your account. So I would also recommend looking at outliers, like a certain keyword that's super high or super low. And then other networks and channels. So if there's no way around it, you have super high CPC, that's okay too. You might still want to be using, your search marketing campaigns, but maybe offset the costs that you're putting into search marketing with a little bit of a cheaper platform. Maybe you want to try search ads. Maybe you want to try, Bing ads more instead of Google ads, because we have seen, changes within the cost CPCs between the two platforms or something like that. That's also an option too. For click-through rate, again, I think this is a pretty big metric for a lot of folks, so I just want people to keep that in mind. It will show, it can be really telling into how you're performing. If you're not even pulling in that click, then you're not even going to get those conversions down the line. So click-through rate is important, and I think a lot of businesses overlook it. But again, you're going to want to drive up your CTR so that you can maximize your results with your search marketing. And I know I keep preaching the keywords and bids, but this will still impact that, right? So if I'm not bidding on keywords relevant to my business, maybe the intent isn't there, or maybe I'm showing for searches that are just searches looking for information or something like that, then obviously my click-through rate is going to be low. And again, if I'm not bidding high enough or using the right bidding strategy, automated bidding strategy for my business, then I might not even be ranking high enough to show and compete and actually pull in that click. And then also ad copy, we want to make sure that we're enticing, we're pulling folks in, we're telling them clearly that we want them to complete an action and that we have value to offer. And also, I would recommend looking at the search queries that you're showing for. You can see this in the search terms reports in the platforms, and we also help folks take a look at those, but it essentially will show what types of searches you're showing for, and where you might want to be adding, maybe some negative keywords as well. Negative keywords are words that you want to negate out that you don't want to show for, and that can be a great solution to these first two metrics as well. Also, we have a ton of resources on negative keywords. For conversion rate, definitely landing page. I know I went in pretty in-depth into this. You want to make sure it's as easy as possible for folks to convert, whatever your conversion may be, and it could even be you're tracking offline conversions, or you're tracking conversions that don't necessarily relate to like a click or a form. Whatever it is, just think about what's the easiest possible way for somebody to do this after they click my ad. And definitely make sure you make that clear. You make that clear in the ad, and then you make that clear in the page itself. And then also your targeting. So with that tracking and with those actions that you want to track as conversions that can impact your conversion rate, also think about your audience. So that can relate to your keywords and bids, but also in general, like what types of devices you're showing to. Am I layering on additional targeting parameters that could be limiting me? Or am I targeting the wrong audience that is never going to convert? Am I targeting, maybe an age range that's too high or too low for my, ideal customer, the average customer that converts? Those are additional factors, those audience demographics that, could definitely impact your CVR as well. And then cost per lead, the big money metric that everybody loves. Again, I'll preach the keywords and bids. The higher paying per click, then the higher CPL is going to be because you're spending more, and then you might maintain the same conversion rate or you might raise it or lower it, but that'll impact your CPL. Also your competitors. So if you feel like you're getting a lot of clicks but they're not converting, do you have a competitor that might be stealing those customers in a way, or potentially making it harder for you to convert? Is there offers that you could potentially do to promote your business to kind of compete with them or show the value that you have over them? And then again, that audience, are they ready to convert? Do they need time to think about it? That's another thing to think about with search marketing. It might not always feel like it's making a difference, but it is. It's just folks are searching all day, every day on every device across our house. So, don't take it personally if you pay for a click and they don't convert right away and then your CPL goes up. It might just take some time. So that's what I would recommend. I always joke the hardest part of PPC or pay-per-click marketing is patience. So I will stay on this just one final time for everybody to soak in the data that we have taken a look at today. You can kind of see the patterns across industries, and I do think that this is helpful to look at. I would also recommend checking out our year-over-year data and see the changes, but you can kind of see some of those patterns that I talked about when you're looking at this view, right? Where, one industry that might have a lower cost per click might have a little bit of a higher cost per lead or a lower conversion rate because, they're getting all these clicks all day long, but they're not super high intent clicks. Or they just are a little bit more informational and folks take time to make these buying decisions. I would say travel is definitely a great example of that. And some of our others here, also real estate is kind of seeing that same pattern. And you'll see that they also have those high click-through rates, right? Because people are going to be browsing, they're going to be clicking through, they want to, check it out, maybe think on it, maybe they're going to come back. And, we all as, business owners, marketers, all the folks on this call today, we understand, what it means to click on an ad. And I always feel like I'm, doing a deadly sin when I click on an ad on a search page because I know it's costing a business money. But a lot of these consumers that might not be in the industry like us don't necessarily realize when they're clicking on an ad. So that's why a lot of these industries that have folks that are, might take a little bit longer to make those buying decisions have these high click-through rates, but kind of like these lower conversion rates. It's because people don't always realize that they're clicking on an ad, which could work in our favor. I think at this point, most people are aware, but they don't really understand the impact that it can make to a business, as we can see here. And you'll kind of see these balance out, right? So if you feel like, you have a high CPC, I would just, again, keep in mind that your conversion rate could be higher, your click-through rate could also, ebb and flow. You might have a lower click-through rate, but those could be higher value. So I think one of the main things that I want you to see as you're looking at these patterns is it's not one end-all be-all metric. There is no one metric that's going to be better than the other for your business, regardless of your goals. All of these are going to impact your business's bottom line. So I wouldn't get bent out of shape if one metric is trending higher or lower than you probably like. So some key takeaways that I want you all to keep in mind. Know what matters to you. And I think, you kind of got that idea as I was talking through just this last point where, the metric that can be telling to your business or your search marketing performance might not always be the one you think. I know I keep harping on it, but your CPL, as much as people care about CPL, it might not be the end-all be-all metric for your business if you're trying to get awareness or you're trying to increase your website traffic or you're trying to understand your audience patterns. You might be wanting to look at click-through rate or you might be wanting to look at your conversion rate. So some of these metrics might be new to you folks here today. So definitely know, your end-all business goals and what's going to matter to you. And these metrics are going to all impact your business. So I wouldn't get hung up on one metric. Know what might work for you and know that it might not always be what you think. Keep an open mind when you're doing your PPC. And then think about how your search marketing is fueling your overall strategy, your overall digital marketing strategy. So for example, what can search ads do to help your bottom line? So are they, you might not see the greatest conversion rate off search ads off the bat, or you might not see the results that you're looking for, but you're noticing an increase in your social presence, or you're noticing an increase in foot traffic again. Like that can all be impacted by your search marketing, and vice versa. So maybe you're generating that general awareness on social and then closing the deal with search ads. So I would also think backwards and backtrack a little bit into, how can my search marketing help my other channels, but how can my other channels also help my search marketing? If I don't have brand awareness, people probably aren't going to be looking up my brand name. And if they do see my ad, they're probably not going to be clicking on it because they don't know my business. Totally fine. Think about what you can do on other channels to generate that awareness to help build your search marketing. Also, as we saw here today, benchmarking is a huge tool that can help your business. As you can see, these can be great guiding lights. So it's hard when you're looking at your performance day in and day out to be like, all right, great, my click-through rate is 6%. Well, what does that mean for me? I have no idea. It doesn't translate to anything. I don't know what my competitors are. So use these benchmarks as a tool to say, do I need to optimize? Do I need to scale back? Do I need to build out? Know your industry as well as you would your own performance, right? So I think that's important. And you all know, if any of you have joined any of our past webinars, and especially the ones that I've presented, there's one thing that I always preach. So if there's one thing that I want you to take away from this presentation today, is always have a backup plan, right? So if you're not seeing the results you want, or you feel like you're a little different from your industry, where one metric falls, another metric thrives, right? We saw that with these metrics that we saw today. You might have a higher click-through rate, but a lower CPC, and so on and so on. So know what works for you and always be ready to try something new. So if you're not seeing the results that you want with search, there's always endless opportunities to optimize, to change, to try something new, to try a different platform. Be ready, have a backup plan, so that way when you do have results that change, and they're always going to change, and that's okay, just be ready for what the next step will be. Even if you're doing great, awesome, I'm doing great with my search marketing, what can I do to make it even better? Or what can I do to keep this up? So always be thinking in the back of your head, all right, what is the best and worst case scenarios with these campaigns, and what can I do in that situation if it arises? So those are kind of our 4 main points that I want you all to keep in mind. And with that, we're going to launch a poll. If you feel like this was helpful, if maybe you want more information, you need to look into your own accounts a little bit more, you want to see how else you can maximize your digital marketing, definitely hit yes on that poll. We're going to keep that up for the remainder of the screen, so if you need some time to think about it, totally fine. But I know a lot of folks on these webinars tend to have individual questions that are specific to their unique business scenario. I definitely, in that case, would recommend hitting yes, just so you can get some more personal advice from an expert from our team. So definitely would recommend that. Again, we're going to keep this poll up for the remainder of the webinar. And with that, I'm going to jump into Q&A. And let's see here, there's a heck of a lot of questions coming in from here. Tons and tons of questions. This is awesome. Definitely chat in your questions, you guys. I see there's a lot that we could go through. I'm going to pick a few to get us started. So, someone had asked about the data here. This was from Katina. Thank you, Katina, for asking this. If the metrics contain any brand search campaigns. So it's 72 unique campaigns per category, per industry category. So it could be, they're all unique. They're not all just branded, and they're not all just non-branded. Someone else asked a pretty interesting question. This is from Celine. Can I have 100 keywords or more in a campaign? Good question, Celine. This is going to look different for everyone. And this is where digital marketing and PPC can get pretty finicky, because everyone's going to have a different opinion on keywords. We have a lot of great resources on account structure and the pros and cons to, minimum or maximum keywords. I would say 100 is a lot, so be ready to manage that. That's what I would say. Now, other advertisers or other folks that have, access to, automated tools at hand, like LocaliQ's Client Center, for example, might be able to manage that, right? Because you have some automation in place, some rules set in place to manage all of those keywords. But for most folks, it's probably not realistic, and here's why. You want to make your campaigns manageable, right? You're already doing a million things in your role. Maybe you're a marketer, maybe you're a marketing manager, director, business owner, whatever you may be. And you probably only have a certain amount of time in your day to manage your Google ads, Microsoft ads, and so on. When you're looking at performance and you're trying to navigate, what are my best keywords? What's going to perform the best? It's going to get harder and harder the more keywords you have. So you want to be able to keep it manageable. And in today's world, with the changing search space and all of the changes that Google has implemented with, close variants, where it's reading through the context of keywords and match types and things like that, you really only need your core terms in your campaigns. Probably not necessary. And I understand the approach here where you're probably, maybe selling a product or have really specific offerings and you want to try and catch all of that traffic. You're not really outsmarting the audience like you think you are, where you're trying to put in that like specific keyword for a very specific product. Maybe I say, I want this specific, pipe or part and I need it in this specific size. You could just put the general term and Google will be able to read through and know that, when they do type in that specific part or pipe size, that it would match to your general term. So I would say you probably don't need 100 keywords, but, it's going to be specific to each person. Okay, great. Some more questions here. Keep those questions coming. This is a great question from Lee. Lee Phillips here. How relevant or irrelevant is optimization score? It seems like most of the suggestions are based around spending more money, and if you ignore them, your score automatically goes up or down. So for folks who are active in the Google platform, you may have noticed lately they're really pushing this optimization score product. And this has been a super hot topic in PPC chat. Aside from our great industry resources at WordStream and LocaliQ, I keep up with it because I'm in the industry, but I would recommend looking at hashtag PPC chat and Twitter because this comes up a lot from a lot of different marketers and experts like me. But optimization score is pretty much this guiding light that Google introduced into the platform, the native platform, for folks that are actively advertising in there and clicking around in there to understand how they can optimize. So it's just Google's algorithm, and again, not thinking through it like a person or a consultant, but just crunching all the data in your account and giving suggestions automatically about how it can try and help you to advertise. And yes, something that we've noticed, and a lot of experts have noticed, is it obviously is going to push the budget push, right? It's going to suggest that you raise your campaign budgets. It's going to suggest that you raise your bids, and that might be necessary. But if it's not feasible, it's not worth pushing it up to raise your optimization score. It does feel like optimization score impacts your account and you want to try and raise it, but it's not really going to kill your account if you have a low optimization score or if you ignore those suggestions. What I do with my folks that I've worked with is, go in there, check it, see what suggestions they have. Sometimes they're helpful. Maybe it's, pausing some keywords, maybe it's adding some ad extensions. Totally fine, do that. But if you're seeing these suggestions that say you need to raise your budget and for the sake of your optimization score, but you can't afford it, not worth it, right? So I'd say do the optimization score suggestions when you can. Try and keep your score up. Probably a good idea, but don't go crazy over it. This is a great question from Sunny here. How long should a Google campaign run to get learning? How do you highlight flash sales or promotions that last for a limited time? Great question. I always say, again, the hardest part of PPC is patience. you're not going to see results right away with search marketing, but you're going to see them probably a little bit quicker than longer term strategies like search engine optimization or SEO, or longer term campaigns. I say give your campaigns at minimum 14 days, 2 weeks. At minimum. More ideally, you'd be giving it closer to a month, because you need time to first get out of that learning period that Sunny just pointed out, right? If you're on some automated strategies, Google's algorithm is going to take some time to understand what you're actually running and what is going to work best for you. So it's running some tests in that initial phase, but then also to just get a large enough sample of data to really understand the patterns and start making data-backed optimization decisions. In the case of flash sales or promotions, I have done this with folks and it still is pretty effective. And that's because, as opposed to SEO, search marketing, search advertising is that faucet that you can just turn on and you'll see results because you're putting budget into it. So for a flash sale or a limited time promotion, you might be potentially putting a little bit more budget behind that campaign. You might be, doing a different bidding strategy, or you might be trying a different campaign type. So while we're doing a search marketing, search advertising focused webinar today, there are other campaigns like display or video within the search platforms like Google and Bing that can really ramp up your impressions really fast and could potentially complement that. All right, we have time for just a couple more questions. Tons of questions coming in, and I wish I could answer all of them because, as you can tell, I could talk about search advertising all day. Karen asked, what is an average or a good quality score? Great question. And again, I love to talk about quality score because it's kind of like, if you have a low quality score and you're still hitting the goals you want, then who cares if you have a low quality score kind of thing. But at the end of the day, you want to be optimizing your account as much as possible. So I definitely get this, and especially if you're trying to maximize your results. And like I said, it will impact, how you're going to rank, things like that. I would say what I've told folks is anything 7 to above, and quality score is rated on a scale of 1 to 10, anything 7 to above is absolutely amazing, right? Those 4, 5, 6s about average, you'll still get results, you make a buy. Anything below a 3 or below probably needs some improvement. And that's pretty much what I would say is like the average or good in terms of quality score. And that's what I've seen with the hundreds of campaigns that I've looked at over the years working in this industry. What I would say too is Google will also indicate where you're at, if it's average, if it's good or excellent. It usually gives you an idea now on the platform, which is a nice new feature that they have. Great questions, everyone. All right, we have maybe time for one more, and these are a ton. Like I said, I wish I could answer all of them. Jeff asked how to lower cost per click. Jeff, we have a great blog and webinar on 15 ways to lower your cost per click. I would definitely recommend that. Many folks are asking about their specific industries. So a couple of folks have asked about budget, and I'll wrap up with this last question of, what's a low budget? What's the right budget for me? How do I know what budget to have? Now, we do cover this in some other webinars and in our resources, so definitely check those out. But what I will say is your budget is going to be dependent on your expectations. So if you have a super high CPC and you have, let's say you have a $10 CPC and you have a $10 daily budget, guess what? You're getting 1 click a day, and that's all you can afford. And that's fine, but just set your expectations like that accordingly and work with that, 1 click a day that you do get and start building that over time. So I would say base your budget kind of around like your average cost in the industry. I hope that was helpful. I know we're right at time. This was a really great session, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. There's a ton of questions. Definitely keep those questions coming. If you felt like you didn't get the answers you needed, definitely hit yes on that poll. Keep an eye out for the materials for this later. Check out the recording on our YouTube. Check out our other webinars, our resources. And thank you all so much for joining. I hope you have a wonderful day.